Uhuru, 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 everybody. Welcome to this special event, a call to white people. Free all African political prisoners, reparations now. Uhuru. Uhuru means freedom in Swahili. It is my honor to introduce this event tonight. My name is Jesse Neville. I am a member of the Central Committee of the African People's Solidarity Committee, the organization of white people working under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. And I'm also the chair of our mass organization, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, which is a tremendous honor. And before we get started with this event tonight, if you are tuning in on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe to this channel to get alerts anytime we go live or post a new video. If you're tuning in on Facebook, please share this live stream with your friends and family. Let us know in the comments where you're tuning in so we can shout you out. We want to thank everybody that's participating on Zoom. Allison, Ali, Ari, Demetria, Francis, Janet, Westbrook, Carrie, Kitty, Len, Malika, Paulette, Ruby, Selena, Sandra, and others. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you're on Zoom, Facebook, or YouTube, comment in the chat. Let us know where you're tuning in from and share this link so that we can pack the room for people to be able to experience this extremely important event tonight. In this event, in this meeting that we are having right now, we will be discussing the struggle to free African political prisoners and prisoners of war in the United States who are being held captive in the US prison dungeons because of the courageous stance that they took during the Black Revolution of the 1960s and that they have taken ever since in the struggle for African national liberation. And we will say why white people, those of us in the white population, that if we consider ourselves progressive, if we consider ourselves revolutionary or socialist or anti-imperialist, we must unite with the anti-colonial demand for the immediate release of all African political prisoners. As I said, I'm a member of the African People's Solidarity Committee, and the African People's Socialist Party formed APSC in 1976 with the mandate to organize other white people to build the movement for reparations and genuine solidarity with the liberation of African people. I want to profoundly salute our leadership, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, the chairman of the African People's Socialist Party, the founder and leader of the Uhuru Movement, the founder of APSC, our chairman, our leader, who developed the political theory of African internationalism and who represents the leadership of the African Revolution and the world revolution of colonized peoples everywhere. And we are incredibly honored to have Chairman Omali Yeshitela as a speaker on tonight's program. Uhuru to Chairman Omali Yeshitela. I also want to welcome some very special guest speakers who will be joining us tonight. And before I do that, I do want to say that the chairman himself is a former political prisoner, having been imprisoned many times for his courageous stance and struggle for the liberation of African people. We will also be joined tonight by Jihad Abdulmumit, an African liberation freedom fighter who was a political prisoner for over 23 years and who chairs the Jericho Movement, an organization that fights for the freedom of political prisoners every single day. So we are very honored to be joined tonight by and to be able to hear from Jihad Abdulmumit from the Jericho Movement, as well as Jaan Laaman, an anti-imperialist activist who was released from prison after enduring 37 years of a 53-year sentence. Again, we are very deeply honored and appreciative to have the opportunity tonight to hear from Jaan Laaman and Jihad Abdulmumit, as well as our keynote speaker, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, the leader of the African People's Socialist Party, the Uhuru Movement, and the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations, that has put the struggle of African political prisoners at the top of its agenda. And last but not least, I want to salute and welcome the chairwoman of the African People's Solidarity Committee, under whose direct leadership I have the honor of working, who will be kicking off this event tonight. And I mentioned that APSC was formed in 1976. That's 45 years ago. When that meeting happened, Penny Hess was there. Chairwoman Penny was present when the chairman and the party held the founding conference of the Solidarity Committee in the fall of 1976. And Chairwoman Penny Hess has been a cadre member of the African People's Solidarity Committee, building white solidarity with Black power, reparations to African people, genuine unity with the African Revolution from the white oppressor nation population ever since. In 2001, Chairwoman Penny published the groundbreaking book, Overturning the Culture of Violence, written under the leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela, which exposes the complicity and participation of us white people in the historical and ongoing assaults and colonial violence against African and other oppressed people. So to kick off this event tonight, it is my great honor to turn it over to the chairwoman of the African People's Solidarity Committee, Penny Hess.
Uhuru, Jesse, thank you so much. And please let me know when my time is up for my presentation. I really want to salute everyone who is attending this meeting. I think it is so significant. And I want to start by joining in and saluting and just saying what an honor it is to have our guest tonight, Jihad Abdulmumit, African liberation political prisoner for 23 years and chairperson of the Jericho Movement, which fights for the freedom of political prisoners, and Jaan Laaman, anti-imperialist activist who was released from prison after being locked up for 37 years of a 53-year sentence. That was so profound. And I am inspired by your courageous stand inside prison, continuing to fight inside the prison for decades and continuing to fight upon your release. That is incredibly inspiring and incredibly courageous on your part. And of course, I salute our keynote speaker tonight, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, leader of the African People's Socialist Party, the Uhuru Movement, and the Black is Back Coalition for Justice, Peace, and Reparations. And that, as Jesse mentioned, Chairman Omali Yeshitela spent many of his earlier years as an anti-colonial political prisoner as well. And then particularly following his incredible Black Power action in 1966, boldly ripping down an anti-African mural that had hung inside the St. Petersburg City Hall for 30 years in full view of the whole community. And that was an act, that was a federal offense. And he was sentenced and had many, many trials and ongoing. I think he was tried more than once for that. The city has never apologized, never taken that on at all. But the place where that mural hung is still vacant in the St. Petersburg City Hall. They knew that they could not replace that. That was an incredible act that is remembered today by the African community of St. Pete. And also that the chairman, spent time in prison for his activism, organizing the African working class for the liberation of Africa and African people, and leading the struggle for political and economic power in the hands of the African community over the years. So, again, I want to reiterate that the African People's Solidarity Committee is an organization of white people under the leadership and formed by the African People's Socialist Party. And all of our work is accountable to the strategy of the party. And the goal, the reason that the African People's Socialist Party formed the APSC is to extend the African Revolution inside the belly of the beast, into the white population, with white people as the voice of Black power in white face. That is our responsibility, to take this anti-colonial question inside of the heart of the white population, and to win reparations as a revolutionary demand, the return of African people's stolen resources, which must go back to the struggle for African liberation. So, I welcome Chairman Omali Yeshitela to this event. It's always an honor to have you, Chairman. And I want to make it clear that all of my understandings that I have today, the way I see the world, comes from Chairman Omali Yeshitela. As a white person, as a colonizer, I would never come to the understandings of seeing the world through the eyes of the oppressed and colonized African working class and colonized people around the world. I could never have done that. That these understandings come from the political leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the political theory of African internationalism. And I also want to salute Deputy Chair Onisene Yeshitela and the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, under whose leadership we work. The chairman formed the Solidarity Committee because it was a correct conclusion that this system is parasitic capitalism that we live under. And this parasitic capitalism was born through Europe's assault on Africa, turning African people into commodities, kidnapping and selling and stealing the labor of African human beings for 600 years. That this stolen labor and resources of Africa and African people has created the greatest wealth ever produced on the planet up until this time. And that they created this wealth forcibly through violence for Europe and white people and the colonial system and that also for us in the Western Hemisphere, that this wealth is built on the stolen land of the indigenous people and the genocide that was perpetrated against them and carried out by the masses of white people voluntarily as part of being the settler colonizers on this land, and that the wealth of the US and imperialism in Europe and capitalism come from this colonial violence and oppression around the world. So this is African internationalism. And I do this work because I believe that we have to overturn imperialism. Capitalism must go. We cannot live in a world where the majority of the people on the planet have to suffer so that a tiny minority can live and have prosperity. That system has to go. And that we must return the stolen wealth. We must pay reparations to African people. And I'm saying this because the way I understand it from the leadership of the chairman, this is the basis for the understanding the truth about political prisoners, that African people as colonized, indigenous, and all colonized people have the right to struggle by any means necessary with the discipline of organization, with democratic centralism, with the political understandings that turn the world right side up. And it is this fight, it is this struggle that is the reason that many African people are still in prison today based on this period of the Black Revolution of the 1960s. And this is why the African People's Socialist Party has taught us, and it's scientifically true, that the struggle is not against racism. It is not against ideas. It is against a political and economic system built at the expense of somebody else. And that the definition of colonialism is political, military, and economic domination of a whole people by a foreign and alien state power for profit. And that the reality of colonialism inside the US and around the world means unending violence for the colonized. It means terror, it means poverty, it means inability to control people's community that is controlled by the whim and of white power and the violence of the colonial state, as we can see every day in police violence and terror and mass imprisonment, in the enforced poverty that African people are forced to live in. And if we understand, as Chairman Omali Yeshitela says, that African indigenous people are colonized inside the borders of the US and around the world, then who are the white people? We are the colonizers. We are the colonizers. And Chairman Omali Yeshitela has taught us that in the 1960s, the Black Revolution was an anti-colonial struggle, no different than the struggles of African people and African people in Africa, or the struggles of the Vietnamese people in Vietnam or Algeria or any place else in the world where people were coming together to organize to fight for their liberation against a colonial power. And that when an imperialist government is faced with what they call an insurgency, a whole people rising up to take their freedom, they wage a vicious war without terms, as Chairman has taught us, that is called counterinsurgency. And that is really important because the US government and others wage counterinsurgency around the world. We see this on the ground today. We see what the US has done to the people of Afghanistan, the people of Iraq, Syria, all throughout the Middle East and all throughout Africa. And we see that the government, the US state, does not wage counterinsurgency against a race. It wages counterinsurgency against an oppressed people who are rising up and organizing and fighting the colonial violence to free themselves from this systematic, this colonial system that has them by the throat every single day. And that's why, you know, the COINTELPRO papers in the United States, the COINTELPRO program, the counterinsurgency program against the African Revolution of the 60s, defined the African Revolution of that time as the greatest internal threat to US stability since the Civil War. And it just came on to the African Revolution infamously with assassinations, imprisonments, political slander, destruction of organization, everything, destruction of the economy of the African population. And the chairman has defined and summed up this attack on the African movement as counterinsurgency, as a state attack against an anti-colonial movement, a liberation movement, and that they wage it against an uprising insurgency, fighting for a whole people to destroy colonialism and win political and economic power and liberation and territory. And, we can see, this is corroborated by history. The 1975, the church hearings that came after the exposure of COINTELPRO by the US government, that exposed what the government was doing to the African Revolution and the MK Ultra and all the other things that came out of that time. And then the Iran-Contra hearings of 1985 and the revelations by Gary Webb, a reporter from San Jose Mercury News, that crack cocaine was imposed on the African community by the US government. And this was part of the counterinsurgency, as the chairman has said, making sure that there would be a war, not on drugs, but a war on the African community, a drug economy, as the chairman has always said, that wiped out the economy of the African community through what was called urban renewal and other forms, and gentrification all throughout African communities all over the US, and wiped out that economy and left only a drug economy that forced African people to put food on the table through participation in that. And we see, in 1994, the crime bill under the Democrats, written by Biden, passed under Clinton, endorsed by Hillary Clinton, that put 100,000 new police on the streets who are responsible for the massive police violence against the African community and the murder since then. It had a 3 strikes you're out provision that targeted the African community. It had the intensification of the federal death penalty. And it went along with this criminalization of the entire African community. I mean, just, horrendous assault in psychologically, politically, economically, in every way against African people in this country. And in 1997, the Clinton administration passed a federal program that turns over billions of dollars of military equipment, from grenade launchers to high-powered guns to tanks to local police departments, to arm them to wage this counterinsurgency against the African communities. And we know that, this drugs and the justification for the massive imprisonment that we see today, that the US government, or the US itself, has the largest prison population in the entire world, that larger than China, which has 3 times the population of the US, that we know that Africans are incarcerated in state prisons at a rate 5.1 times the imprisonment of white people. And then in 12 states in the United States, half of the prison population is African. In Maryland, whose prison population is 72% African, it tops the US. And there's so many more statistics that we can put out. And that colonialism also includes enforced poverty, that the average white assets in the US are more than 10 times the average of African people, meaning nearly $200,000 is the average white family's assets versus an average of $17,000 for African people. And here in St. Louis, where I am, this income gap is 15 times greater between the white community in the wealthiest neighborhoods and African people in the most impoverished neighborhoods of St. Louis, meaning that in terms of the income, it's over $200,000 a year in wealthier white communities versus $15,000 a year for a family of 4, or something like $5 a day after taxes for African communities on the north side of St. Louis. So there's so many other ways that we can show this colonial reality, and that, we just want to say what we understand, that for white people, every dream and aspiration comes from this reality of sitting on a pedestal at the expense of African people, that this is where we get our ideas of democracy, our social wealth, everything that we have passing down to from generation to generation. And they're saying that, there's $70 trillion in the United States getting ready to be passed down to future generations in the white community predominantly, because that wealth is not in the African community, that we have social wealth, we have generational wealth, we have ability to raise money in a crisis, that we're not saying that every white person is rich, but every white person sits on the pedestal and is part of the colonizer nation, that we as a people have acted as the military when the state didn't carry out the violence. We did it. We lynched, we burned, we tortured, we raped, we pillaged to get what we wanted for ourselves, to wipe out the wealth of African people, to steal their wealth over and over again, to destroy their ability to organize for their freedom throughout history. And that, we see the murder, the assaults, the Jim Crow, the burning down by just regular white people of African economic centers like Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Rosewood, Florida, and many other places. And that we see our complicity in this whole locking up of the African population, which the New York Times estimated that in general there are 1.5 million African men missing from the communities today because of the massive imprisonment and the early death rates. So when we talk about political prisoners, we have to understand that African political prisoners are the political prisoners, the ultimate thing. And it's not a matter of different isms or different categories, that the anti-colonial fight of African people gets to the original sin of the system of the US and of imperialism today. And it is something that we are calling on the white left and white people to understand this, that we have to fight for political prisoners. It's not, there's Jihad on the one hand or Julian Assange on another, that the ultimate struggle is the struggle against colonialism and the right of African people to be free and liberated. That is the anti-imperialist struggle, and that is what we call on white people to support and take on. And that The African working class is the working class of the world. The US government knew it in the 1960s, and it knows it now. And that under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, we understand that African workers are leading the struggle for power, for liberation, for the return of their stolen resources, for self-government, for self-determination, for the return and unification of Africa as the birthright of every African person on this planet. And that the existence of the African People's Solidarity Committee extends the African Revolution into white society. Our revolution is the African revolution. We have a job, and that is to return the stolen resources. Reparations is a revolutionary demand. We've got to be the voice of Black power and white face inside the white population when other white people jump off that pedestal, that unity with colonialism, and join the true revolution of the world, join the revolution led by the African working class for that will end imperialism and colonialism once and for all. And we know that the African People's Socialist Party is very serious about winning African liberation, completing the Black Revolution of the 60s, and elevating and bringing along and fighting for the liberation of all oppressed and colonized peoples on this planet. That is the planet that I want to live in, that I want to see. That is the only force that will even save this very planet that has been destroyed by the colonial system itself. So I just want to say that the African People's Socialist Party says the African Revolution is winning, and indeed it is, and that our slogan is unity through reparations. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Uhuru, unity through reparations. Thank you so much, Chairwoman Penny Hess. Just want to express my absolute unity with every word of that very powerful presentation that was just made by the Chairwoman of the African People's Solidarity Committee. For anyone who has tuned in since we got started, you're watching Free All African Political Prisoners, Reparations Now event sponsored by the African People's Solidarity Committee, whose Chairwoman Penny Hess we just heard give the opening presentation. And just want to salute and thank you, Chairwoman Penny, and appreciate that your presentation puts the question of political prisoners in the context of the anti-colonial struggle and the counterinsurgency against African people, as Chairman Omali Yeshitela has defined it. So thank you so much. And there will be Q&A. So please, those of you who are watching, write down your questions. I have a notepad here. I've been doing it myself. Take notes. There will be time to make comments and ask questions. And now to move on to our next speaker, it is my great honor to introduce the chair of the Jericho Movement, which is an organization that fights to raise awareness about and to demand freedom for political prisoners and prisoners of war inside the US. Please join me in welcoming Jihad Abdulmumit. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Thank you, Jesse, and thank you, Sister Penny, for that wonderful and powerful presentation. I begin as I always do. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. Again, my name is Jihad Abdulmumit. I am the chairperson of the National Jericho Movement. And I just want to present some things about why it is important to support political prisoners and what it is exactly that Jericho does and where you can fit in or should fit in into the whole process of supporting political prisoners. First of all, there's a principle here for any liberation movement, for any liberation struggle, and that is that it undermines our efforts in what we're trying to do if any movement that profess standing for human rights in any fashion and regard, particularly a Black liberation movement as such, and it does not include and inculcate, the reality, the champion for the release of its freedom fighters. And now we're talking about freedom fighters, sisters and brothers that's been incarcerated since the movements of the 60s and the 70s. All right, so first of all, for everybody that may be listening, one simple thing you can do right now, if you say, okay, freedom fighters, political prisoners, who might they be? You can go right straight to the Jericho Movement website, the jerichomovement.com, and see who they are. You can also access the Black is Back Coalition website and on those posters that they're representing and selling, so that we can uplift their names in that continuity in history, and you can begin to see who they are. That is our homework assignment. That is our homework assignment. If anything, baseline what to do is, when we're struggling for freedom, when we're struggling for self-determination, we also have to uplift the names of our freedom fighters that are still incarcerated and in prison, because, you know, incarceration is one of the tools and the weapons that the ruling class have used, that the government has used to actually destroy our movements. You know, there's assassinations, there's incarcerations, there's marginalization. They can control the narrative, and we can't not let them get away with that. So freedom fighters today that are incarcerated, our political prisoners, and one of them just got out. He'll be on, shortly on this program. Jaan Laaman just got out. We're talking about in captivity for 40, 50 years, and they're getting away with this. And it's one reason is that even though a person may be getting old and decrepit, even in some cases, and so I'll talk about some of these cases, you know, you say, well, what is the fear? You know, why are they continue to be incarcerated even past their parole dates and the time that they have been given? Is because of the ideas that we represent, the ideas that we can still articulate, the motivation and the education that we can give to our younger sisters and brothers in this movement. Our thoughts and our ideas is super powerful. So even though a person may, well, the argument is that, well, there's no threat to the community, and that is definitely a struggle for someone, but the enemy knows what's in your mind is very important, you know, and another reason is to instill the fear. If you ever think of getting out there and waging revolutionary struggle in any way, fashion, and form, this is what can happen to you. You will lose your freedom, but we already know that. When we start out, you already know the consequences. And so we cannot be superficial and emotional about it. Another thing about our freedom fighters, sisters and brothers, is that it's not, you know, we realize that when we present on who they are, which I'll bring up their names in a minute, that 30, 40, 50, 60 years is quite some time, you know, and then from the 60s, from the 70s up until now, a lot has happened. And our struggle has reached the lowest of lows, and there's been some high points, low points. Penny mentioned the infusion of drugs, and mentioned a web and bringing in crack cocaine into South Central through the Crips and that organization. So we know that that was another vehicle to distract from our attention. Also waving the carrot, you know, and buying us off. The counterintelligence, the intrigue, pitting us one against another. And we falling for the okie doke all the time. Economic sanctions against our communities, against us. You talk about embargoes, you know, we know about the embargoes that the United States can drape on any country that they will. Cuba, right, just some 60, 90 miles away from us, but they got domestic embargoes too. They will embargo you also. You'll be marginalized. You'll be prevented from getting a quote unquote better job or as such. You'll be blackballed, you'll be blacklisted yourself. So the embargo is not only on other countries, it's on us too. So these are all the tools in the enemy's tool chest to undermine and derail, and actually to a certain degree actually have destroyed our movement. But I will say on the up note with that, just like an oil stain on a white rag, you wash it as thoroughly as you possibly can and let it sit for a minute, and I'll be daggone. There's that stain again. There we are. So they will never, ever relinquish the movement in this country or anywhere else in the world where people live and breathe. They'll always be fighting for our freedom. So freedom fighters stand for a lot of things, sisters and brothers. I always maintain Jericho. When I say I'm talking about Jericho and the Black is Back Coalition, the African People's Socialist Party, which Chairman Omali will represent himself. We maintain that your support of a freedom fighter that's in prison now, right now, is the strongest nexus. It's the strongest connection that you can possibly make more than reading a book, more than anything, it is the live connection with the supporting a freedom fighter that you can make with the rich history of our struggles in the past. That's just why we're alive. That's just why we're alive, because we cannot afford to leave any freedom fighter behind, to take that phrase from some character that we know. But we can't afford that. And the one reason, blaring reason why we can't do that, sisters and brothers, is because you may not be paying attention, but your enemy is. I mean, you got to get your sleep, you got to get your rest. The enemy never rests. You know, the shift change from 8 hours to the next hour, they'll pass your folder over to the next person. He'll remember what Chairman Omali did 30 years ago. He won't remember, they do. On August 13th, such and such a year, we know exactly what you did. So they're monitoring us, and they know how important it is to truncate and cut off the lifeblood of supporting these freedom fighters. When we talk about supporting freedom fighters, political prisoners, I'm using the word freedom fighter more because that's who we're talking about representing. We're talking about also acknowledging, you know, our past rich history of fighting for self-determination in our community. When the Black Panther Party was started in October 1966 with Bobby Seale and Huey P. Newton, you know, the whole notion was defending ourselves against police brutality, standing up against that, knowing our Miranda rights. You have a right to remain silent. You don't have to divulge anything. You have a right to attorney. Anything you say can and will be held against you, and all these type of things. So that was how it started, to make sure that you're not brutalized in a dark alley by a police car. The same thing that happens today. So that was the impetus of starting the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense in Oakland, California back then. And this brutality continues to exist. As this before, it continues to exist today, as we see through the ugly assassination of George Floyd on TV and Breonna Taylor and so many other people. It's very difficult to even mention all their names altogether, all right? But our freedom fighters were the ones that stood up about this, to defend our communities, which is still a question of how that, but not just defending our communities, sisters and brothers, perhaps with a weapon in our hand and standing up strong against the police. That was our attempt. That's what we attempted to do. But it's also defending our communities by developing our communities, by instilling a sense of self-determination and will of freedom inside of our community. That's what it was for the whole idea of the survival programs. We have built our own free clinics. I know I joined the Black Panther Party when I was 16 in Plainfield, New Jersey, and we built a clinic from the ground up. The focus then was sickle cell anemia, and we had doctors volunteer. We had our free clothing drive, free breakfast programs, political education classes. But the purpose of that, as Huey said in one of his writings, is just was like a life raft to get us to shore, that shore being own little communities, to be able to patrol ourselves. But we also realize, sisters and brothers, that a trend has to be set in order for communities and people to be educated. Just don't pop and become educated overnight, nor these programs and processes develop overnight. You know, but so we have to be in our communities, establish a track record. And that's what the Black Panther Party attempted to do. And we had our fighters on the front line, you know, sisters and brothers. And we did all these programming. So when you think about medical care and tending for ourselves, you know, you think about Dr. Mutulu Shakur. When we talk about the bringing in of drugs in our community and our sisters and brothers falling out because of heroin addiction or any addiction for that matter, well, Dr. Mutulu Shakur had his own clinic up there in New York to do just that. When we talk about controlling our own narrative, then we look at Mumia Abu-Jamal, who was intelligence set up and framed. But I'm proud to say that in some cases, it was because of us standing up fighting with a weapon in our hand. And oops, oh my God, here we are. But it's funny how we can champion these struggles all around the world. But when it comes to talking about our freedom fighters, we're hush, mum's the word, don't say anything. And I'm not confusing that with legal strategies to get somebody else. I'm talking about what's said on the ground and how we are known about in our own communities and what's the thinking of the people. So we have to get to the point, sisters and brothers, you know, by supporting our freedom fighters to learn the lesson that we have to be, as Jalil Muftaqeen says, you know, we have to be our own liberators. And by supporting the freedom fighters, and that's the hook that I'm going to, just like a Motown song, and the brief time that I have to speak here, that I'm going to be singing, that we have to support our own freedom fighters. You know, we have to be our own liberators. That's the hook in my song. So there we talk about the African freedom fighters. I want to let you know that the National Jericho Movement and all its chapters and all its affiliates, we support all political prisoners. But tonight we're focusing on the African political prisoners of African descent. And we have Joy James, we have Kevin Rashid Johnson, we have Malman Kabir, we have Kamal Siddiqui, we have Dr. Matulu Shakur, we have Imam Jamil Abdullah Al-Amin, we have Mumia Abu Jamal, we have Fred Muhammad Burton, we have Russell Maroon Schultz, we have Veranza Bowers, we have Kojo Bomani Grayling Brown, we have Rochelle McGee, by the way, he's approaching 60 years in prison. He just got turned down from the parole board. And we have Ed Poindexter, we have Michael Green, we have Sunyata Kohli. And anytime we uphold the name of Assata Shakur and we don't mention Sunyata Kohli, it's because we don't understand the history and the connection there. And he's 83 years old, 84 perhaps now, and just been denied in parole, medical issues there. So there's staunch campaigns. I may get a chance to speak about that. You know, we have the Virgin Island 3, which is Abdul Aziz, Hanif Shabazz Bey, and Merrill or Malik Smith. We have some brothers that's been educated in prison. We have Imam Hassan Siddiqui and Bomani Shakur that were part of the rebellions in Ohio State Penitentiary. And we have more. And we have, like I said, political prisoners of other nationalities, anti-imperialists. We have the American Indian movement. We have Leonard Peltier. We have those of Hispanic descent and so forth and so on. And we represent them all. All right. So no prisoner left behind, sisters and brothers. Some other points that I want to bring out. There's a lot of contradictions here. And I want to just speak about them real briefly. When we talk about freedom fighters and how the government has controlled the narrative and the hypocrisy. And when it said, I already said that the United States is good for dropping embargoes and instilling fear in people if they say or act in a certain type of way. That's from the United Nations on down. That's why our efforts, as Al-Hajj Al-Sabaz Malik Sabez said that, you know, take it to a human rights level. Well, since the 60s, when he said that the United Nations has been very reticent and unresponsive, even though we will continue that trajectory because that is a point of voicing our struggles to the rest of the world. But once again, we are our own liberators. You know, it's the hypocrisy of it all. We have a sister that's in prison now. Her name is Dr. Afia Siddiqui, just for example. So now you have, for I don't know how long, Mexicans or sisters and brothers from South America coming up, you know, trying to get over into the United States, for example. This is how they control the narrative. Just as just an example, leading again into political prisoners. So, you know, here at this border with Donald Trump's wall, and even with Obama administration, and even still, you know, we have, you know, there's a stop there. Can't get across. Okay, we understand that. You separate the children from the parents. All right. And you put these children into detention centers, juvenile detention centers or concentration camps, and oftentimes on the squalid conditions, and oftentimes being subject to abuse and all these type of things. And then you look on the news here and we see the United States government bringing in, I don't know, how many tens of thousands of Afghans and just, anyway, you know the reason why so many people are flocking to the United States from South America is because of the destabilization and control of the imperialist control that the United States has had over these countries for decades now, destabilizing them, exploiting them, setting up puppet regimes, dictators, and now that is all imploding, now it's open for gang. It's just full of corruption and extreme violence. Now people are trying to get to the United States across the Mexican border, a border which the United States have imposed by taking Mexico's land and all these type of things that we don't know because the narrative is not really explained, and we don't know this because we don't necessarily study our history. And now you have tens of thousands of Afghans, and I'm not saying this in any slight against Afghani brothers and sisters fleeing from what they perceive as being their oppression and taken away, I guess, of the luxury life that they may have, the little bit they might have been living with Western help in the United States being there. But you see how that contradiction is. And so now here you have a sister, a Pakistani sister, is in prison with 86 years. So what about her rights as a Muslim woman? So this is one of the things that the Jericho Movement is going to try to work with those coalitions to bring out this. And we ask you to support on not only that with her situation, but many other political prisoners in prison right now. So we have to be able to grab the mic. We have to be able to put ourselves in the position to control the narrative so that a person won't be, when you bring up a condition with Imam Jamil Al-Amin and giving support for Jamil Al-Amin, you won't have a Black person ask you, well, didn't he kill a police officer? You know, that would be, that's a testament to how effective the government's been with their narrative in criminalizing our movement. You know, did Nafia Siddiqui kill somebody? Did Mumia Abu Jamal kill somebody? Did Russell Maroon Schultz kill somebody? And if that's the litmus test for you supporting somebody, then you need to, well, I'm not gonna tell you what to do with your body parts, but you know, it's not a question of guilt or innocence, sisters and brothers, when we're fighting for our freedom. You cannot champion the cause of struggles and revolutionary struggles around the world. And when our sisters and brothers have attempted to stand up for themselves, regardless of what the government, how they try to criminalize ourselves. And my litmus test that I try to ask as a question is to say, when you open up a history book and see Nat Turner or Denmark Vesey or Gabriel Prosser, do you see a hero or do you see a criminal? As simple as that. It's the same dynamic, fighting for your freedom against violent oppression. And that's how it is with our freedom fight. It's not a question of, did you do anything? The question is that, are you going to support our freedom and our liberation and those that have stood up for it? And that's a strong position to take. The best way to get to the people with that is to organize people and continue the process of education, which the Jericho Movement does. The Black is Back Coalition does, the African Socialist Party does. Educate people is an ongoing process. It's a humongous job, sisters and brothers. And you say, well, okay, it's a humongous job. That's why your family members aren't there with you. You feel what I'm saying? Can't even educate your family members, your sisters and brothers, your aunts and uncles, your parents, your siblings, your children, maybe. It is a humongous job. That's how powerful the narrative is. And I know, you can feel what I'm saying, because the struggle is real. Before I get off, Penny and Jesse, I would just like to say some detailed things real quickly, run through some bullets about what the Jericho Movement does. It was started in 1998. I think on the chat list we have Paulette Dalto on. She's on our advisory committee and was once the co-chair for the Jericho Movement. So I salute you, Paulette, if you're listening to me. Jericho Movement started in 1998 is to uplift the names of our freedom fighters. If it wasn't for the Jericho Movement, I believe that many of the freedom, Malman Kabir, who did you say? Baranza Bowers, who was that? Because many of them didn't have the limelight, such as maybe coming off of a case such as the Panther 21 or something that's renowned or known that hit the media. A lot of us are thrown under the bus through our actions and never heard of again. So the Jericho Movement is a vanguard organization to make sure that the Kojo Bomanis and the Kamal Siddiquis and the Russell Marone Schultz and the Fred Burtons and the Jojo Bowens that you would know who they are, and that their legacy will not be snuffed out, by the government and the powers that be. We also mobilize around parole initiatives, commutations of sentences, clemency, pardons of that nature. A good example of that was Jericho collaborates with other organizations. Some of the political prisoners have defense committees. Some of the political prisoners have defense committees. So Jericho not only educating and working with their own initiatives that they initiate themselves, we also work in lockstep with other defense committees. I'll give you an example of that right now. One of our freedom fighters that was just the other day granted commutation of sentence, his name is David Gilbert. And so collaborating with those comrades that worked more directly with David's case, we participated in a massive call-in. And I don't know, I don't know how many calls Governor Cuomo's office listening to, but it was really focused and it was heavy duty. I can bet you one thing, if there were no calls, if there were no letters, and it was just David Gilbert asking for clemency, he wouldn't have gotten it. He has life without parole. He has life. Now he has the opportunity to go to the parole board, which we will be building up a campaign to support him. But because of this intense, his name, we uphold his name. We collaborate with those organizations that support him. We kick it in hot, heavy, and very strong on these calls, bombarding Governor Cuomo's office with faxes and emails and letters so that it grabs somebody's ear, and just coming up with a narrative that's going to be attractive and compelling enough for him to get, for the last 2 or 3 or 4 hours of his resignation, he commutes his sentence. Okay, the same thing could be said with the efforts for Oscar Lopez on the last day of Obama's administration. Now, you can say there's a lot of political intrigue behind some of this, but if it wasn't for these revolutionary movements, including Jericho, being involved in the intrigue to get these freedom fighters out, just left up to their own fending for themselves, they would still be in prison, rotting in prison like that. So we have a lot of campaigns going on like that. I'm almost done. And so we also provide third-party intervention when comrades in prison have medical issues. So we educate the community, uplifting their names. We provide logistical and public support for going up before the parole board or asking for compassionate release, clemency, and things of this nature. A comrade gets sick, and now we're getting older. Now we have cancer. I can name 3 or 4 comrades in prison now, freedom fighters that have cancer now. Marone Schultz has 4th-stage cancer. Dr. Batulis is 4. And so we campaign to try to get them released from prison, and then whatever, working with legal teams, lawyers, raising money, because you got to have money to pay the lawyers. A lot of times lawyers do things pro bono, but raising the money, that's how the government used to drain the Black Panther Party. Just bust one of us and we have to sell donuts or rob a bank or something to get somebody out of prison. They're always draining our resources. So advocating, conversation, and things of this nature, writing and communicating with prisoners, being present in the political prisoner's life, being present, writing them, letting them know how we're doing, what's going on in the street, listening their ideas. What do you think about this? Yeah, getting their input, having them involved with what's going on in the street, helping family members to go to visit them, us visiting them, and really being on top of their situation year after year, unfortunately, decade after decade for some of them. And so Jericho, as you can see, is a very important role. I made on the last annual Black is Back Coalition seminar that we just had, which was very powerful a couple of weeks ago, sister and brother. I made a comment, which I guess is true. So I don't know if Paulette heard it. She'll probably laugh when I say it now, but I said now if I went from Black Liberation Army member to just a revolutionary administrator, because I'm always on the call every day or every other day, it seems, making critical calls to governors, talking to attorneys, emailing back and forth to parole boards. I spend a lot of time writing and doing that type of work. And right now, to the younger comrades deal with the demos and setting up the education programs and things of that nature. But all of this is very important. I thank you for giving me the time to be able to explain this. But the bottom line, the hook in my Motown song here is that no prisoner left behind. And there is no liberation movement without uplifting and supporting and campaigning the freedom fighters who went before us. That is so hypocritical and it's so superficial, and it's not going to bring victory. And you can believe me that your enemy, our enemy, is looking at how we don't support our freedom fighters. That means those Black Lives Matter activists, those other sisters and brothers that in the formations that we may not even know about, that is maybe be putting on their work. If they're ever captured today, tomorrow, next week, and there will be incarcerations. That's how the movement goes. That's how revolution is. The government can bank on the fact that once they're captured, that we don't have the muster, the strength, or the wherewithal, the vision, or the tenacity to support them. So we can't let this slide like this. We have to be there to give full support. So I salute you, Jesse and Penny, and I salute Comrade Omali Yeshitela and the Black is Back Coalition, the African People's Socialist Party, and I definitely salute my comrades from the National Jericho Movement and Jaan Laaman. I guess you're still going to be on some point in time. So I thank you very much. I'm going to fade out, but I'll be right here. Assalamu alaikum. All power to the people. Free all political prisoners.
All power to the people. Uhuru, thank you so much.
Uhuru.
Jihad Abdulmumit from the Jericho Movement for that powerful presentation. Here, this is the African People's Solidarity Committee's event, Free All African Political Prisoners, Reparations Now, political prisoners, or as Comrade Jihad Abdulmumit just said, freedom fighters, African freedom fighters who fought and continue to fight against the colonial system that is responsible for them being in prison in the first place. And I just really want to appreciate Jihad and all of the members of the Jericho Movement who are here and all of the incredibly important work that the Jericho Movement is doing. So thank you for that very, very powerful and illuminating presentation. And to keep our agenda moving forward, it is now my great honor to bring on another fighter for justice and freedom for African and oppressed peoples, who was released in May of this year after 37 years as a political prisoner. I apologize if I mispronounced your name, Jaan Laaman. We are very much appreciative and honored to have you join us today on this webinar, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Uhuru.
Uhuru, let me just say real quick, I've been having a little fluctuation with my connect. Just very quickly, you know, I'm recently released last May after 37 years of captivity. I was part of the armed clandestine underground in the 70s and the 80s, part of an organization that can be known as the Ohio, South Africa, supporting the Palestinian struggle, supporting the struggles in Central America and Nicaragua, El Salvador. Also, of course, aware of even today, we were charged with various actions against Black people. And I always have to bring this up because it's just, you know, very deeply embedded in my memory and my brain. About the time we were captured and arrested, the New York City police killed this older sister, Eleanor Bumpers, killed her right in front of her apartment door, shot her, just like the Louisville cops murdered Breonna Taylor almost 40 years later. These issues and struggles are still here, and they were there then. We were fighting against them then, and we continue, of course, and we need to continue to fight against all of that today. I think it's absolutely correct. The way we should look at the situation is the political prisoners, by and large, are freedom fighters. And many of them were literally, you know, freedom fighters as we would think of as liberation soldiers. Although it's true, some people just set up and fabricated charges and, you know, total, you know, created cases by the U.S. government. But even across the board, the people in captivity today, and it's important, just like Brother Jihad was saying, we need to remember their names, know their names, pass them on, educate ourselves, our friends, our comrades, our families about them, certainly our children about them, because these were the people that were in the front lines of fighting for all the things that, I don't want to start repeating, but all the things that especially Sister Penny was laid out so well, you know, in terms of U.S. imperialism, the USA government, and, you know, the struggle against it, which is both right here within the United States of America, but it's also, you know, on a much broader scale because U.S. imperialism tries to sink its teeth into, you know, everywhere it can around the world to suck out the wealth and the resources of other people, just like it, you know, sinks its teeth into us to you know, to suck out our labor and our wealth and, you know, take it, expropriate it for themselves. So I would just, like to emphasize that point that, this whole entity, and, I'm not trying to, I'm sure we all understand this and agree with this, but this whole entity of the USA state, of the United States of America today and whatever it was before it became this, is based on the land of the indigenous people, the genocide committed against almost all of them, and then built upon the stolen enslaved labor of African people. That was the beginning of this thing. But all of that is still absolutely there today. And it's a different manifestation. It's a different, approach to it. Historically, we talk about so-called Jim Crow and, but the fact of the matter is that same basis, that same exploitation, oppression, and repression continues today as it was very much in the beginning. And it continues today upon the same basis, false ideology, so-called white supremacy, and all the policies that derive from that. So this is the essence that it started from, and this is the essence of what we're fighting today. What I'm really trying to get at is that the key struggle for the absolutely necessary change that this country and world needs, the key struggle of that is the struggle of African liberation, Black liberation within this country as well as around the globe. So in terms of our understanding, and then in terms of the particular policies and struggles and campaigns we get involved into, having that kind of clarity, I think, is very important for us. Certainly, part of that campaign and that clarity is the support and the education we should do about the reality of political prisoners. It's already been stated before, but in my own situation, after about 5 years of trials, I was finally sent to my first U.S. penitentiary. I went out to Leavenworth. When I got in the door there, I was greeted by Sundiata Kohli and by Leonard Peltier, and soon after by other brothers, some of the MOVE people and Bill Dunn and others. But my point here is that Sundiata, he is still in captivity today, and he was locked up in the 70s. Leonard, the same thing, locked up in the 70s, still in captivity today. So, it's not just a question of, what we can do for these people, but I mean, these brothers, sisters as well, many of them at the point where they're coming to their end days. And of course, the healthcare and so-called and medical so-called services and so forth are horrible in prison. And sometimes they consciously go out of their way to make sure that the political prisoners get even less or are subjected to even more medical abusive type of situations than just some other convict is. But our need to escalate the push is very important right now, and there seems to be a good bit of talk recently about political prisoners. So we should take this energy that we have. We should take this heightening awareness and really push it, because these brothers and sisters, they need it. Now, Brother Jihad was just speaking a little while ago, and I just want to emphasize this. I know on my phone every day I get all kinds of messages and information about cases and situations and news and so forth, and I'm glad to get it because it keeps me informed. But I mean, there's always like multiple situations to keep in mind and multiple requests for doing something. But I think the thing that just happened the other day when the Cuomo, the Creek governor there, was just before he stepped down, there was a big push made, calls going to his office and stuff to do something for David Gilbert and, a few other prisoners as well. And sure enough, he actually signed the commutation papers for David. Now, David still has to go in front of the parole board. There's a whole other hurdle and struggle to take on. But my point is, it shows us that sometimes even taking a little bit of time, sending that email, I mean, we know how basically, those are not very significant things to do. I mean, there's much more serious and broader things we also need to do, but don't let those smaller issues pass, and, mobilize, like your close circle at least. Come on, let's do this, make this call. Because sometimes at key moments, those are exactly the things that are needed to be done and will produce some results. So, I'm just emphasizing that point. I mean, it's not something that, is unique or insightful necessarily, but, even the small work is really important and will do something. One of the things I just want to also say, the contact with political prisoners and from the outside, certainly Jericho, I know, speaking for myself and all of the political prisoners, that their contact, their communication back and forth, their support at certain crucial times, and their general maintaining communication and dialogue with political prisoners, over months and years and decades, is very important. It's important for several reasons. One, because in order for the political prisoner to be engaged in work with the outside, there has to be direct links with, revolutionary people outside, with the revolutionary freedom fighters inside, listening, talking, debating, working together on projects and programs. But it's also very important because the political prisoners across the United States, federal system, state systems, all of it, are always the prisoners most under the microscope and gun, so to speak, of the prison authorities and officials. So when they see a lot of communication, people outside, whether it's just cards and letters, or whether it's, information being sent in, certainly books and publications and so forth, it kind of stays their hand a little bit, saying that, well, too many people are just too aware of this person and what they're doing, and there's too much communication. If we go overboard in some form of repression, they know that there's going to be a response. So while all political prisoners, I mean, I say this with no hesitation and across the board, and I've had the pleasure, unfortunate pleasure, I guess I would say, of actually being in behind many prison walls with many of these comrades that have just been talked about, Jamil Alamin and Mutulu and on and on. But just having that kind of human contact and communication, is also important just for, just a general, good attitude and positivity that we all need in the course of, struggling against U.S. imperialism and the whole, idea of what that means and is in this country and around the world. But, as one would understand, even more so probably, when you're sitting behind a prison wall and being locked into a little cage about the size of, or smaller than most people's bathrooms, and this is your reality. So having that contact, having that human touch, as well as, political dialogue and so forth, is all part of why it's important for us to know about and support and keep in, contact with and keep in unified struggle with those comrades that, we can't see a demonstration or, go to and see at a meeting or even a Zoom meeting for that matter. So those are all important reasons why we should keep these things in mind as we, do our daily work and engage in struggle and, build our organizations and reach out and do different campaigns. Keep them part of that also. Keep them, those sisters and brothers, part of that also. I guess, so much has been said so well already. I guess what I'll do at this point is just, step back for a minute here and listen to the rest of this and then engage in dialogue with people as we go along here tonight. Free them all.
Free them all. Free all African political prisoners and prisoners of war. Thank you, Comrade Jaan. Thank you so much for your presence here It's an honor to have you on here and for your courageous and principled stand, continuing to fight for revolution as you did throughout the whole time that you were locked down. So we thank you for being here. We salute you, and just really want to appreciate what you said about the fact that this social system, that the origin and essence of this system is that it's built on the enslavement of African people and the genocide against the indigenous people of this land. And that the key to the overturning of that system is African liberation. That is right on. So thank you so much. I really appreciated that whole statement, Comrade Jaan. And everybody who has spoken so far. This has been an incredible event. For anybody that has tuned in the middle, you're watching Free All African Political Prisoners, Reparations Now, hosted by the African People's Solidarity Committee, white people organized under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, organizing for reparations. And speaking of the African People's Socialist Party, now I would like to introduce our final speaker for tonight, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, the founder of the African People's Socialist Party and the African Socialist International. Chairman Omali is the acknowledged leader of the African nation, and the African led the world in defining what the African nation is, a nation that will be consolidated by the victory of the worldwide African revolution. Chairman Omali Yeshitela has given the world the science, the theory, the strategy of African internationalism, proving that the assault on Africa, the sale of African human beings, and the theft of African land and genius built the wealth and power of the capitalist system and the pedestal upon which all white people sit. Chairman Omali Yeshitela has built on-the-ground organization led by the African working class around the world. And Chairman Omali Yeshitela created the African People's Solidarity Committee in 1976 to send us white people behind enemy lines as the voice of Black power in whiteface. Now it is my tremendous honor to welcome Chairman Omali Yeshitela to this event. Uhuru, Chairman.
Uhuru, thank you very much, Comrade Jesse, for the introduction. I'd like to also express appreciation to Comrade Penny Hess, the chairwoman of the African People's Solidarity Committee, and our incredible guests here, Comrade Jihad, Comrade Jaan. I just want to say that the African People's Socialist Party, we are not a race nationalist organization. And I want to be clear on that question. I have been with comrades in Ireland. Some of you comrades may, if you've especially been associated with the question of freeing political prisoners, may remember the blanket prisoners who were in Ireland under British colonialism. I have worked with the Irish Republican Socialist Party there in Ireland and various other places. We were in Nicaragua very shortly after that revolution, in solidarity, and before that, in solidarity with the Nicaraguan revolution. That's how we happened to be in Nicaragua. In solidarity with the Salvadorian revolution. We fought in the streets of Gainesville, Florida, against mobs of white people who, in 1979, because they were threatening and sometimes harming Iranians and people who and Arabs and anybody who wore a turban, because they didn't know Iranians were not Arabs, and they were about dealing with this whole question of the so-called hostage crisis, where the Iranians had captured what they rightfully characterized as a nest of spies in Tehran after the US government had overthrown their legitimate government of Mohammad Mossadegh and replaced him with this vicious Shah who so terrorized and victimized the people of Iran, and who functioned as a policeman in the Persian Gulf region. And so we have always worked with those comrades. We have been to Big Mountain at the time when the Dineh were facing federal possibility of federal troops, and were prepared and was with them prepared to engage in armed struggle in opposition to that. So we're not a race nationalist organization, but we are an anti-colonial formation. And I think it's very clear that when we look at this issue of political prisoners right now, when we look at the question of prisoners of war, the reason that we are facing this particular group of political prisoners and prisoners of war, which are extremely important to us. All of political prisoners are important, but this particular group of political prisoners and prisoners of war are there as a consequence of the defeat, of a military defeat on the anti-colonial struggle of African people. It was a war that was waged against us, fighting for our liberation as a colonized population. And the African People's Socialist Party was founded during this period of time. In fact, my origin is with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC. I organized the first membership SNCC organization in this country, in the state of Florida. We were there, and SNCC, as you know, is the organization that created the Lowndes County Freedom Organization that came to be known as the Black Panther Party. And our office in Florida was the Black Panther office, even as we were SNCC. I went to jail for the first time, went to prison for the first time after a march from the Panther office in St. Petersburg, Florida, the SNCC office. And in what was characterized as the first Black Power direct action in the country. And that was on December 29, 1966. Something like 3 months later, the similar demonstration happened in California when the comrades from the Black Panther Party marched in Sacramento at this time with guns. And so it was an incredibly explosive era. It was a moment of time that the Chinese revolutionary characterized as a time when revolution was the main trend in the world. And that was not different in the United States. And the war against the revolution in the United States was not different from the war that was waged against oppressed peoples globally. And in fact, it was in many ways, it was much more important, because one of the things that made it necessary for the United States to get out of Vietnam, in addition to, of course, the courageous, heroic struggle of the people of Vietnam that crushed first France and then delivering incredible blows to U.S. imperialism, but that was helped. Their victory was helped because, in addition to having to fight in Vietnam, the U.S. had to fight in Detroit, and they had to fight in Newark, and they had to fight on various other places throughout this country. And people talk now about the 1033 program, and that's an important program. That's where the military is transferring all these weapons to police organizations throughout the country. But the basis of that was the struggle that African people were waging for national liberation, not for integration, not because of some empty slogan like Black Lives Matter that doesn't tell us anything that anybody can do, including somebody like Biden, who's responsible for putting 100,000 policemen in the streets of this country and escalating the prison population something like 800% over a very brief period of time. Responsible for the fact that 1 out of every 8 human beings on this earth, who's in prison is an African in the United States, because there was a struggle against this colonial struggle that Africans were making. And J. Edgar Hoover, who was then the director of the domestic political police in this country called the FBI, was absolutely correct when he talked about the Black Panther Party representing the greatest internal threat to the United States since the Civil War. That was the Panther Party. Of course, that was representative of the struggle of African people against colonialism. So this is critical for us to understand that the struggle against that resulted in these comrades who political prisoners of war came about as a struggle against as a war against the anti-colonial struggle of our people. And it is true that almost everybody who was involved in the struggle at this point was clearly struggling against colonialism. There's the foreign and alien domination of a people. That in this instance, the U.S. state. But I want to just take it a little step further, if I may, because when we talk about colonialism, we're not talking about just a policy. What we're talking about is the fact that colonialism is a mode of production, always was a mode of production. It was the thing that brought Europe moved Europe from feudalism. Is the bridge between European feudalism to what people now refer to as capitalism. It is what Karl Marx referred to as primitive accumulation, and that he characterized as turning Africa into a warren for the commercial hunting of black skins. This is the foundation of the whole system everywhere in the world. It is the reason why we live in a world today that where something like 80% of the people on the planet Earth are trying to survive off less than $10 US a day, and 50% of people on this earth are trying to survive off $2.50 or less a day. And if you're in Africa, people work all day often just to get one meal. So this is what we are talking about. It is colonialism is the actual mode of production. We call it colonial capitalism because you can't have colonialism without, you can't have the capitalism without colonialism. Can you imagine the existence of this thing they call capitalism? If there were no enslavement of African people, if there were no taking of this land that we call America today, if half of Mexico wasn't stolen from them, if we didn't have any of this stuff happen, you'd have white people who were still living in Europe, perhaps acting as warring tribes, struggling against each other. But it was this thing that's known as colonialism, this primitive accumulation that Karl Marx talked about that changed the world. And it didn't change it in one place, it was globally it happened. And so you had Portugal who attacked Africa in something like 1415, starting the capture of African people and the trade in black people around the world that kicked off the entire capitalist colonial system that gave rise to capitalism. So that's what we are talking about. And that's how this thing is so important to us. When we look at the question of what it is that we're fighting against, because we're tired of people who want to fight against capitalism on the one hand, but they don't want to fight against the parasitic capitalism, which is colonialism. And that's why it is so easy too often for people to unite with this whole question of political prisoners in quotation marks that do not call for them to be for liberating Black Liberation Army forces, people who were fighting against colonialism. And that's one of the distinctions that we make. It's one of the things that we think is really important, because the US, we say free all the political prisoners, free everybody, but we do recognize that there is such a thing as respectable political prisoners. Those political prisoners that the whole white left, everybody can unite with, and many liberals unite with them, because their mission is to reform America, is to make America better. And where you had people like Sundiata, like Jaan, who were engaged in a struggle to overturn this vicious social system, and where it's not just Sundiata that many of these people wouldn't support. They didn't support Jaan either, because he stood on the side of the colonized people who were fighting to overturn the system, not try to make it better someplace that we can live in. He wasn't doing that. So we make that kind of distinction we think is important. I agree with Comrade Jihad. Let's do everything we can to get these comrades out of prisons. And we want everybody out of prison. But I also believe that Sundiata is absolutely correct. I love this quote from him that he used to make a while ago when we knew him, when he said, the more sweat in peace, the less blood in war. And that we need to sweat like rain just to deal with these issues of political prisoners. Let's get them out. But the African People's Socialist Party was founded in the process of struggling against political prisoners, because I was a political prisoner. I was out on appeal bond for a period of time from a 5-year sentence when the African People's Socialist Party was created. I was out on appeal bond when Sundiata and Asada were stopped in that car on the New Jersey Turnpike. So I was a political prisoner. We have engaged in some of the most important political prisoners issues in this country and some in the world. We were the ones who led the struggle to free Desi Woods, this African woman in Georgia who had shot and killed this white man, Ronnie Horn, took his own gun as he was trying to rape her and kill her. We went into Plains, Georgia. We went to James Earl Carter, the good white president, the good colonizer, lived on a plantation in a plantation city in Georgia. The first demonstration ever happened there. We organized that. And it was an action that was an anti-colonial action. We were clearly struggling against colonialism. And guess who was there? There were Puerto Rican Africa activists, militants who were there. There were Mexican militants who were there. There were people who believed in revolution because that was the continuum that we were involved in, struggling to make this revolution. And our approach to the question of political prisoners is part and parcel of the struggle to make the revolution, to complete the Black Revolution of the 60s that was stalled as a consequence of them putting Comrade Jihad and Comrade Sundiata and Comrade Jaan and some of these other people, locking them up in those prisons. So we believe very strongly in doing whatever we can, whatever is possible to get them out. I used to plan on how to get Sundiata out there, out of prison. One of the things I used to love about the Black Liberation Army, because those comrades did not believe in staying in prison. If it was possible to get out of there, they were getting out of there by any means necessary. And I used to plot on how when Sundiata was locked up in New Jersey, and I would visit him. I used to plot on how it was possible to get him out of there, because nobody, all of us are innocent. The system is always guilty. The system is always guilty. Colonialism is always guilty. And when you talk about colonialism, in the United States, we characterize it as domestic colonialism. It's peculiar in some regards, in that the colonizer and the colonized occupied the same land. And it's stolen land as that, as Comrade Jaan has just said, where genocide or near genocide has been committed on the indigenous people that most people don't even speak of. They live in concentration camps, euphemistically referred to as Indian reservations. There's nothing legitimate about the United States. There's no way that the United States has any moral authority. The only reason the United States can lock people up, put us in prison, and then insult us and humiliate our communities and our people and the peoples of the world is because the gun. It's the gun that does that. And we didn't have to have Mao tell us that political power comes from the barrel of a gun. Every experience that we had in our life showed us that was the reality. So we've been fighting to complete the Black Revolution since our founding in 1972. And one of the reasons we are talking about political prisoners today, or it's becoming more fashionable today, is because of the work that we've been doing over the years to complete the Black Revolution of the 1960s. That included the work to build the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations. Not to join Black Lives Matter, but to build the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations, to bring as many as possible organizations together, African organizations who believe in self-determination. And of course, there are various tendencies within that self-determination movement. We have various beliefs about what that means. But the point is that has to be the dominant politic from our perspective. And so whomever we can win and bring in there and put on a trajectory, a movement, a revolutionary trajectory, get from just behind the computers, becoming social media militants and actually engage in struggle. And winning our communities and our people. That's what we've been about. Guess what, comrades? As quiet as it's kept, Africa, the political prisoners have been not locked up because of some apathy on the part of Black people, on the part of the people who just say, oh, you know, that who've now conceded to the game that the U.S. has played. No, the war against African people was a total war. It was not like breaking a strike or something like that. It was a war against the whole people. And so when they were putting locking people up, that was one component of it, but the entire African population was a threat. Anybody who does not understand that the United States has a contingency plan to deal with these colonized subjects, and particularly Africans in this country, you're misled, misguided. So what we are talking about is that the whole people came under assault. And the reason that you have these individuals who are political prisoners, the reason I was a political prisoner is because we were out front. We were out front to lead the whole people, and the whole people were susceptible to our politic, our line. And that's why J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI said that they were identifying what? Black nationalist hate groups. That's how they characterized us. So we were the ones who were out front. And so they hit us first. They had to go through us to get to the people. That's who the revolutionary, that's who those comrades we were talking about, political prisoners in war, they couldn't get to the people without going through us. And going through us made the streets open. So now the streets could be dealt with. They put drugs and all other kinds of things in the community going against the whole population. They assaulted the earth with the objective of never seeing anything revolutionary emerge in these spaces again. And so then when they assaulted the earth, it was a splendid counterinsurgency that brought in billions of dollars to a troubled economy at that time. Billions of dollars coming from drug sales and everybody knows by now, Oliver North and other forces who were tied to the US military, to the US state, were involved in bringing drugs to this community from Costa Rica and other places in South America, where they had begun to make war against that colonized people, to deepen that war against the revolutionary forces there, as they were making war against people in Vietnam. So they make war in Vietnam, and then they take what was then majority of the drugs coming into our community, forms of heroin, and then suddenly Africans change our taste in drugs when the United States discovered that they had to crush the revolutionary movement that was emerging, especially around Nicaragua and other forces like that. And so they go into that area, and then cocaine becomes the preferred drug in our community. No, we were being set up. And the thing about it is that it was a perfect scheme. It was a perfect counterinsurgency, because the people who were being victimized by it actually thought that it was our idea. And what had happened was, there was no drug problem in our community. It was a drug economy. The same colonizer who refused to allow African people to work in the legal capitalist economy, established an illegal capitalist economy in our communities, the drug trade. And so we were all running all the time, fighting against the pig. The same state that had locked up our warriors now were now able to make war against the whole people. Who was going to then free the political prisoners? Who was going to fight for the political prisoners when the whole African population now is subject to the kind of terror and humiliation and slander that was afforded us? So that even our children were characterized, as somebody already talked about, with some kind of predators, and they talk about the children were drug babies, and the young people were drug pushers, or they're gonna be drug pushers, they're looking out for drug pushers. That's all you could hear everywhere. And it was the United States government that did it to us. And so that's the thing that's complicated this struggle. But we in the African People's Socialist Party have all along recognized that the question is total liberation. Total liberation. From our perspective, the task is we recognize that there's struggle for Black people. The struggle for our people had run into its limitations when fought within the borders that have been imposed on us by colonialism. That there is not going to be any Black US liberation, Black US freedom. That African liberation is going to be it's going to be an international project. That's why we have built the party and are building the party every place in the world. That's why we are located not only in the United States, but we are in the Caribbean, we're in Africa, we're in Europe, and everywhere it's possible to take the Black revolution. That's where we are. And we have built organizations there. In the same fashion that Garvey moved to create those kinds of organizations. We have built institutions throughout the United States, and are building them also in the continent of Africa, even as we have this discussion today. And so our institutions are designed to negate the colonial power, creating dual and contending power. They got a power that's illegitimate. We are creating our own power right under their noses, in their faces and what have you, throughout this country and the United States. And there are different projects that we've created that contributes to that. And then we've created the African People's Solidarity Committee that's hosting this meeting today. And we did it at a time where there's certain kind of race nationalism permeated our whole movement, and say that if the white people run it, the white people this and the white people that, how you work with the white people, how you trust the white people. We say we don't trust the white people anymore than we trust you. We trust our strategy. We know what the system is made of. Now we are able to send forces into the white community. We can take the revolution. We open up a whole new front for the African Revolution is no longer just in my community, but it's in their community now. It's their children, it's their neighbors, it's their mates and things like that. That's opening up a new front for the revolution. This is the work that the African People's Socialist Party has been doing. And we agreed that these comrades need to come out of these prisons. And that someone made the point, why in the hell, I really appreciate Jihad, being able to say, I did it. And these the comrades, they need to become known as heroes and heroines. Those comrades who took the stance for our liberation. We don't have to be ashamed of the fact that somebody killed an occupying military force, and that's what the state, that's what they are. The police, nothing but the military, domestic military force in our communities. They're all the time, a permanent presence. And everybody recognizes that the police is a form of the state. And for us, it's the colonizer state, it's the colonial state. And that's no different from any colonial state that's been any place that they'll have Africans who are part of that colonial state. They'll have Mexicans, they have anybody, but that state is there for the purpose of maintaining the colonial domination of African people and the people around the world. That's the entire structure. That's what NATO is. That's what the United Nations is. That's what all of these international structures that they have created, political and economic structures, are to maintain this status quo right now. And now it's in a state of crisis. It's in crisis because it's got competition from forces like China, who's moving in on what was supposed to be the sphere of influence of the United States of just Europe. They have to deal with other forces, even Russia now, who's re-entered the scene, not the Soviet Union, but somebody at least contending with the hegemony of US imperialism. And US imperialism is sorely wounded right now. And that's something that we must understand, that it is a wounded animal right now. That's what January 6th it was, when you had these colonizers who attacked the Capitol. This was not the Black Panther Party. This was not Jomo. This was not the African People's Socialist Party. These were colonizers. And this is a statement of this. This is a representative of the disarray, the growing disarray, the growing crisis of the social system that we are contending with right now. And that is part of why I can say truly that we are winning. And the fact that we are engaged in this discussion right now, talking about our political prisoners, and we say free them all, free all the political prisoners. But the reason that we started here with the African political prisoners is that we want to restate for anybody who is confused around this question that African people are engaged in a struggle against colonialism. That is a foreign and alien power that has imposed itself on Africa, African people globally. And it is a foreign and alien power through colonialism that is able to extend this power to other peoples around the world. And we welcome anybody who can unite with the struggle against colonialism and see that the struggle to free these political prisoners is a critical part of the struggle against colonialism. So we say, yeah, free them all, free every one of them. And I want to again express my appreciation to all of you comrades who are here, Comrade Jihad. I finally got a chance to meet personally, at least the last webinar we did, Comrade Jaan, impressive. I so much appreciated some of the stuff that you said in the first webinar we did, particularly recognizing that when you go to prison, if you're revolutionary, you make prison where you make revolution where you are. That's our objective. We don't stop making revolution, we make revolution where we are. And part of the revolutionary project that we engaged in building right now is the kind of support demanding the liberation of these comrades who are in prison. And guess why they have to be free? They have to be free because they are part of the struggle for the freedom of all of our people and all the oppressed and colonized peoples around the world. That's why we free them. Not some innocent. Is Joe Biden innocent? Is Trump innocent? Was Clinton innocent? Were all these murderers that occupy power in this country and around the world innocent? Hell no, they're not innocent. And nobody talks about how Afghan military force who guns down a US occupying force in Afghanistan is some kind of criminal. It's somebody, you might not like him. You might want to slander him because of his religion or something to that effect. But the truth of the matter is, everybody recognizes that they have a responsibility to fight, to chase the occupiers out of their lands, their countries. And we have a responsibility to crush the occupiers here too. So the same thing of true about colonialism in Afghanistan is true about colonialism here in the United States, even if it's characterized as domestic colonialism. So we have to be free. That's all there is to it. And I really, again, just want to express my appreciation to all your comrades, and especially comrades who made such magnificent sacrifices and still are able to hold your head up and to call for and to do the political work, demanding the freedom of all of those political prisoners and freedom for all of our people. Uhuru. Free them all.
Uhuru, thank you, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Free them all, free all African political prisoners. Reparations now. I just want to salute that brilliant, profound presentation from our leadership, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, the chairman of the African People's Socialist Party. That was an incredible and rallying and mobilizing presentation that arms us as white people to understand that what we're talking about in this event tonight, we're talking about political prisoners, but deeper than that, we're talking about the struggle against colonialism. Colonialism must go. This social system has no redeeming qualities. It must go. And I just want to express my profound unity with all of what Chairman Omali Yeshitela said, and for the chairman's steadfast and determined and relentless leadership and fight for 50 years to build the worldwide African revolution, including creating a place for us as white people to contribute to this, to take a stand, to do our part, to carry out our task, our mission, our assignment in the belly of the beast, behind enemy lines. And before we go into the question and answer session, I want to make a call to all white people who are watching this program tonight to join the African People's Solidarity Committee. Go to apscuhuru.org and fill out that form to become a member of this organization today. APSC is the organization that Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the African People's Socialist Party created 45 years ago to provide a way for white people who want to take a stand on the forward side of history to be able to practice genuine principled solidarity with the African Revolution by working under the leadership of the African working class revolutionary party itself. That it is referred to as Black Power in Whiteface. It is the African Revolution, the anti-colonial struggle, extending itself into the colonizer population. And for those of us who are white, who are colonizers, who are settlers, we have to be anti-colonialists. We have to take a stand. We have to join the fight against this vicious, blood-sucking, colonial, capitalist social system that has enriched us for hundreds of years at the expense of African, indigenous, and colonized peoples. And the only way that we as colonizers can truly be anti-colonialists is to join organization under the leadership of the African Revolution. We have to be organized. We cannot do it as individuals. We must be organized, and we must be organized under the anti-colonial struggle of the African working class under the leadership of its vanguard party, the African People's Socialist Party. So if white people want to get organized for reparations to African people, reparations as a revolutionary demand, as an anti-colonial demand, go to the African People's Solidarity Committee's website, apscuhuru.org/join, fill out that form. We will contact you within 24 hours. You will get a phone call, you will get an email, and you will begin the life-changing, life-affirming, and incredibly beautiful and optimistic process of coming into this dynamic organization of the African Revolution that gives us white people the opportunity to be not only to be able to see the world through the eyes of the African working class, but to be able to be a part of building the new world under the leadership of the African working class. So join the African People's Solidarity Committee. Let's get organized, white people. Let's get organized for reparations to African people as a revolutionary demand. apscuhuru.org/join. And as a member of APSC, I just want to say there is no greater honor and just opportunity that we can have to be part of changing this world than to work under the leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the African People's Socialist Party. So come join us. Go to apscuhuru.org/join tonight. So now I'm really excited for this next section because we get to hear from all of the people who have been tuning in. And I just want to recognize all of you who have been participating. We're talking about people tuning in from Cleveland, Georgia, Mesa, Arizona, from occupied Azania or South Africa, Philadelphia, Miami, Florida, Gainesville, Florida, St. Petersburg, Florida, Lakeland, Florida, Los Angeles, California, Sierra Leone, Ireland, St. Louis, Missouri, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I know there's other places as well. Let us know where you're tuning in from in the chat so we can shout you out. We already have some comments and questions that have come in, but there's still time to submit yours. So whether you're Zoom, Facebook, YouTube, just put your comments and questions in the chat, and we would love to have all of our speakers come back on so that you can have the opportunity to address some of these questions and comments that have come in. So I want to start off with a question, and all of the speakers are welcome to turn your cameras back on and join us back on here for the Q&A. This is a question from Tafari Mugeri, who is the chair of the African People's Socialist Party in occupied Azania. And Chair Tafari writes, quote, "Prisons are instruments of colonial class oppression. Even in South Africa, there are political prisoners who are still in the dungeons for resisting the apartheid settler colonial state, despite the ANC Black government. Can we say that the colonial state is unforgiving? I am saying this because sometimes it makes no sense that they are keeping ex-revolutionaries in prisons who may no longer be a threat. Or perhaps the enemy knows something I don't about this." Uhuru. Chairman, I think you're on mute.
Well, thank you, Comrade Tafari. Comrade Tafari is, as was just mentioned, he is the chair of the African People's Socialist Party in what they call South Africa. And it is true that this farce, the African National Congress went through, it was a farce, and they locked up, they went through this truth and reconciliation stuff that, so that the white people who killed and murdered Africans under colonialism, they come up and they can apologize for it. But the Africans who killed white people had to come and apologize also. That was truth and reconciliation. And there were a number of Africans who were engaged in armed struggle who absolutely refused to apologize for having fought for liberation. And under the ANC, that there are scores of them, there are many of them, I don't know scores now, because that's the 1994 when the so-called independence came to South Africa. And there many of them are still locked up. And so the truth is that the colonizer, the oppressor, is forever afraid. It's not a statement of their strength and power, it's their fear. Comrade Jihad touched on the fact that they are even afraid of our ideas, of what we represent, who we are symbolically. Look at how they killed Lumumba. Look at how they killed Che. The thing is, they tried to hide the bodies. They cut up Lumumba, burned them, put them in acid vats and stuff like that. So with nothing left, so people can see have something they could rally around. That means freedom, liberation. And so that's part of what's happening. And so you got a handful of people who are old, and as Comrade Jihad mentioned, sometimes decrepit, who are still there, but the people are still oppressed. And because the people are still oppressed, some of the best memories that the people have, think about this. When people think about freedom, Black liberation today, right now, 2021, some of the best memories people have are those Africans with those black berets on, those shotguns, and out there doing the work. That's the best memories. There's no better memory that African has. And so that's the memory they want destroyed. They don't want that to live. That's why they're afraid of Sundiata Acoli at 83 years old. And if you know Sundiata, like Comrade Jaan just talked about, Sundiata, you will never know a more enduring human being than Comrade Sundiata, you know, and that's why they fear him. I mean, he's a little guy. But he's an incredible warrior, and he's big in their imagination, and he needs to be big in our imagination as well. So yes, Comrade Tafari, they are terrified of the revolution, and the ANC never represented anything revolutionary at all, and that's becoming clearer every day. So I hope I responded a bit to what Comrade Tafari was just talking about. But the point is that they're doing this to us everywhere. And it doesn't matter if the colonizer has this neo-colonial, you have settler neo-colonialism in South Africa. Settler neo-colonialism there, it's the same apparatus. It's the same, they didn't even destroy the state. The same apparatus that existed then exists now with black faces attached to them.
Uhuru, thank you, Chairman. I don't know if any other panelists wanted to address the question, or we could go to the next one. All right, so the next question comes from Afua on YouTube, who asks, or who made the statement and followed by a question. White supremacy will not allow Black liberation. Separation from the oppressor is the only solution. Your views?
Well, they've never allowed anything from us. Even the so-called integration was not allowed. I mean, everything we've ever got, we've took it. And sometimes they have made some concessions to us because of the growing intensity of our struggle. Even neo-colonialism, even white power in blackface became necessary because the colonized people were able to always recognize the colonizer as this outsider, this foreigner who was dominating us. And so neo-colonialism became necessary because of the success of the struggle, the people becoming more awakened. And so they've never given us anything. We're gonna have to take it all. And that's something that's really, that we have to really understand. There's not gonna be enough Joe Bidens, Bernie Sanders, or anything like that. We're gonna have to take it. We're gonna have to take it. And that's what I've been working on anyway. That's the African People's Socialist Party. I've been trying to develop the strategy and build the forces globally so that we can take our freedom and all the resources coming to us, and do that in unity with all the oppressed peoples around the world. So no, it's not going to give it to us. We'll have to take it. But having said that, I don't want to say this in a fashion that that suggests opposition to reform. I'm opposed to reformism, but I'm not opposed to reform. I'm not opposed to using various tactics and even treachery, like to deal with getting our forces out of those hellholes that they're stuck in. And so we do whatever necessary and possible to retrieve those comrades. You know, so Uhuru.
Uhuru, I want to add to what Chairman Omali said, you know, and I so much applaud you, comrade. Yeah, it's not the word allows, like you said, allow anything. You know, everything we get, we have to fight for. And our slogan is still free to land. And how we get there strategically, principally, in our struggle, don't let that be confused with acquiescing or anything like that, you know. So our struggle has many layers, many complexities, but, you know, to simplify it, it's free to land and having our own, being able to raise our own flag and still our own government. However many years it take, maybe next year, because a lot of times it's based upon kind of objective conditions, something collapsing in front of your own face. What we have to do is be prepared and ready, poised, and positioned to take that leadership position. And so every day through our education, through our building, through our representation in our communities, we're doing just that. So sometimes when it's seeming it's going just slow. And once again, I think on the Black is Back program brought up the fact that the movie Spooker Sat by the Door, all this training, all this working in the community, all this maneuvering, all this jockeying, you know, it changed on the police killing of a drug dealer. So you never know what conditions may develop in this country. Right now, the question of self-determination is debated and debunked by liberals, and look like we have a small stance, but things can change just like it could have possibly changed on January 6th with the powers that be fighting amongst themselves, and we would have been left, hopefully not with our ass out, unprepared to be able to pull some type of leadership for our own people, because they say when two horses fight, the grass underneath gets trampled, and that's only if we're not prepared. So we don't want to get trampled. So every day, through our organizing, through our educating, through our mobilizing, through our building of coalitions, such as the Black is Back Coalition, through our work to free our political prisoners, all this, like it was said, it may seem, like Jaan said, it may seem like small things sometimes, but all the time we're jockeying and positioning ourselves so that we'll be able to seize the time when the time comes.
Allow me to say a couple of words here too on this. As just been spoken about, it's not about getting something, it's about taking it. From the perspective of a white person, I think another thing that's very important, especially for us, is to just not only reject, but attack those, totally false and ridiculous perspectives, especially that ideology, so-called ideology of white supremacy. It's important for us to put that out there and fight it, and just, it very easily done actually too, once you just engage in it, so it's not just a matter of taking what we need to take, but it's also a matter of fighting and just, slamming that so-called ideological basis that imperialism and U.S. imperialism in particular, tries to use as its foundation for why it is what it is and should be there.
Uhuru, thank you. This has been a great discussion. Chairwoman Penny, were you about to unmute?
Uhuru. Wow. Well, first of all, I just want to say how much I appreciate this program, and it's very inspiring. And I want to just really salute, of course, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, who is our leadership, and to be able to join in the great call that Jesse just made for white people to join the African People's Solidarity Committee, because the African Revolution is our revolution. And that's what we have to understand. I think, in a way, what Jaan is talking about, like our responsibility is to take this message to white people and to organize other white people to show them that, a lot of white people are committing suicide, addicted to drugs, and, all kinds of things, that there is a place within the African Revolution. And it's not like that's their revolution, that the anti-colonial struggle is the leadership. And of course, all political prisoners must be freed until African people have power, and the political prisoner or the prisoners are going to be the capitalists, under the leadership of the liberated African world, and under the leadership of the colonized. And I just want to call on white people to recognize that there's not, white people are not going to lead this struggle. There's no way. That's been shown over and over again. The whole opportunism of the white population in trying to control, or basically fight for something that is about greater share of the loot, on the top of the pedestal on the oppression of African people. And I just feel like that's just the critical question that's here, that Chairman Omali Yeshitela has created a revolution that has a front in the white population, that we have a role to play, and that is reparations. That is winning white people to recognize that our interests are on the side of the African, of the indigenous, of the oppressed and colonized people. And but to do that, we have we have something we have to do. We have to pay reparations. We have to recognize what white people have done and the complicity and even the ability to, step a toe into one of the 26 million people that demonstrated against George Floyd, but never do anything else. That if we want to be about changing the world, we have to be organized. We have to be organized, and we have to be organized under the leadership of the African Revolution. Uhuru.
Comment, Jesse. May I?
Yes, please.
I want to just a point that I think I made poorly earlier on, just in terms of the war that was made against our movement, our people around these political prisoners and prisoners of war, because it was intense. It was extraordinary. I mean, people were being, I did work for a while in Northern California. You were there, Penny, where people were being assassinated, especially people who were working with this prison question, talking about freeing political prisoners. We even retrieved some of the documents from the FBI that was where they were pitting groups against each other who were engaged in trying to get these Africans out of prison, out of political, and not just Africans, by the way, but political prisoners in general. But there was actually war. I mean, bodies were being found in the desert and what have you. People who were so-called prison activists. We worked. I built the first support committee for Geronimo Pratt. I organized that in our office on Haight Street in San Francisco, and all kinds of agents came into that. First of all, came to claim that Geronimo Pratt was an agent, and then after that went so far as to terrorize these young Africans who we had brought into the work to free Geronimo Pratt. Our place was attacked, armed thugs who made the mistake of believing that just because, we weren't quote unquote clandestine, that somehow that was, to come at us with guns was sufficient to push us off the point. I'm just saying that this struggle to free the political prisoners was intense. It was happening in the war that was being made against the movement on the outside, as well as happening on the inside. Attica, San Quentin, Florida State Prison. I mean, there's just war all over the place around these political prisoners. So it wasn't just that the African community just capitulated and said, well, that's it. I mean, it was total war that was made against the whole people. That's one point that I think is really important to make. And the second thing I want to say is that we talk about over close to 50 years of the work that the African People's Socialist Party has been doing. And one thing that was clear to us, Comrade Jihad, a long time ago, is that there's a tendency in how our movement was represented and perceived, sometimes with the help of the oppressor, and sometimes through our own actions, is that we were just fly by night. We're here today, gone tomorrow. There was no stability. I mean, we institutionalized the revolution. I mean, that's why we're talking about 50 some odd institutions that's been created by the African People's Socialist Party. You go into our furniture store in Philadelphia and you get into a discussion about reparations right there. It's a successful store. It's a successful store, the one that we got in Oakland, Reparations. And you will see pictures of political prisoners and talking about trying to liberate these people. We've institutionalized our presence in 1,000 different. We opened up we got a farmer's market in North St. Louis, and one of the most destitute areas in this country. We got a farmer's market that have more than 100 vendors feed their families off the farmer's market we created in Philadelphia. So we have an institutional presence because we didn't have that. But the preachers got an institutional presence. The petty bourgeoisie, they institutionalized so people can go and find them and hook up with them in certain ways, but they could never do that with the revolution unless they want to go to a demonstration or something to that effect. So the thing is to institutionalize and normalize anti-colonial behavior. anti-colonial institutions. So it's not just something that a narrow group of people believe in, but growing numbers of people. And you talk about reparations. We do more reparations work than anybody in this country. I mean, I'm not saying this boastfully, it's the truth. I mean, we've built all kinds of institutions as a consequence of reparations that we get right now. We didn't wait for the government to get reparations. We've won numbers of white people who voluntarily say, I want to give this money to this institution as reparations. Because we are convinced that the question of reparations is not going to be determined in a courtroom or in the legislature, although we can go to all those places, but the people will make the determination. Once Africans say that we believe in reparations, guess what? Much of what people have been arresting for that was doing the kind of work you were doing, Jihad, will be legitimate in the eyes of the masses of our own people. We're gonna say he stole something, he reparated it. You understand? And so I'm just saying that, and there are more and more, there are hundreds of white people. We've led demonstrations of hundreds of white people. We've run candidates on reparations. This is the work. This is how our revolutionary movement has matured, how it has been developed. And we're gonna continue to work to free the political prisoners as a part of the overall struggle against colonialism. Anyway, I've talked too much. I recognize it. I'm going to concede and back off. Uhuru.
Uhuru. I just know we're probably at the end, Jesse and Penny, but I definitely want to ditto what the chairman just said. And I really resonate with that word institutionalized. That's why I was talking about the track record and establishing yourself and being present there for the people. So when it's time to say, like Malcolm said in the movie, the Spike Lee movie, when he went like this, for those that can see me, we point the finger, nobody's going to say, who are they?
That's right.
And they ain't got no right. No, you by your work in servicing the needs of the people and empowering them and setting a revolutionary example, that is truly self-determination in practice. So top salute to you, comrade, and the African Socialist Party for sure.
Uhuru.
Uhuru. Wow, this has been an incredibly powerful discussion to cap off an equally powerful event that we had tonight. I want to thank all of the speakers, and I wanted to just read some other comments that came in before. I would like to ask all of our speakers if they have any final comments before we close out our event. So these are not questions, but these are just some comments that people sent in. So shout out to Paulette of the Jericho Advisory Board, who said, greetings and thank you, Jihad. Wonderful discussion of the Jericho Black, Brown, Red, and White political prisoners who have fought for the people and build the world that Penny Hess spoke of. And thank you, Jaan, for all your time behind bars from the work you did on the outside. And Karpani, who is from Oakland, said, member of Oakland Jericho, said, so grateful for your wisdom and educating. Jihad, so appreciate your work outside and inside, Jaan, and deep gratitude for your freedom and continued gifts to the movement. Powerful educating, Omali Yeshitela, feel your passionate commitment, taking it home, Uhuru. And also shout out to Demetria, who wrote, Uhuru, this was amazing. So just want to appreciate everybody. And before I turn it over to Chairwoman Penny and Chairman Omali Yeshitela for any closing remarks, I'd like to see if Comrade Jihad and Jaan, anything that you all would like to say to close out, this portion of the discussion.
Jaan, comrade.
Yeah, I'll just say very quickly, what we're doing here tonight, this kind of work, this kind of sharing, understanding, and knowledge, exactly what we need to do, and we need to expand it beyond just who's here now, but each one of us that are here tonight can do that. And the only other thing I'm going to say is free them all.
Free them all.
That's right, free them all. And I did what Comrade Jaan said. I really value the space and appreciate it in real time of what we're doing. So, all power to the people and free all political prisoners.
I just really want to thank Jihad and Jaan for coming on. This has been powerful. It's really, really important. And also, please let us know when you have call-ins like the one you were talking about that you had with Cuomo, I guess last week, please let us know about that, because we can help get the word out on that as well. And just, this has been fantastic. I want to always, as always, salute Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the African People's Socialist Party that has the strategy that's winning, that has the incredible strategy for actually liberating Africa and African people everywhere. And white people have a role and a place to play under the leadership of the African Revolution inside the belly of the beast. So unity through reparations and free them all. Uhuru.
Uhuru, comrades. I just want to thank comrades Penny and Jesse for making this webinar happen. And I cannot overstate my appreciation to comrades Jihad and Jaan. And I mean this in the deepest, most profound way. I mean it in part as somebody with a very profound love for you. And because you know what love is. You really do. I know you know what love is. And you have to have gone through some things, you know, and experienced some things to be tested in a deep and profound way to discover what love really is. And so I just want to really, again, express my appreciation to you, comrades, for everything that you've done and everything that you continue to do right now, for being stalwart and standing up, and so that other people can look at you and they can, you know, feel the light that you that emanates from you. You know, that they don't see cowards and someone beaten down and what have you. It's I'm so proud to call you my comrades. I'm so proud to call you my comrades, and it's my responsibility, of course, to live up to that as well. So Uhuru, and free them all. Free them all. Uhuru.
Oh, Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Uhuru. Thank you so much, Chairman. That was a beautiful statement. And I want to salute all of the speakers. Thank you so much, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, Chairwoman Penny Hess, comrades Jihad and Jaan. This was an amazing, amazing event. And it wasn't just an event, it was a call to arms. And I want to reiterate the call to join the African People's Solidarity Committee, apscuhuru.org. And want to again thank everybody who participated. And I'm going to make some closing announcements. And I also want to salute Lisa Watson, who's a member of the African People's Solidarity Committee, who's been behind the scenes this whole time and who played a key role engineering and coordinating this event tonight. So shout out to Comrade Lisa as well. So to take us to our announcements, here we go. So I'd like to announce that on Saturday, August 28th, 2021 at 7 p.m. Eastern, don't miss a Black August web event hosted by the Burning Spear newspaper, Free 'em All, the African People's Socialist Party's commitment to free our political prisoners then and now, featuring the Burning Spear newspaper's editor-in-chief and APSP Agitprop Director, Akile Anai, Kalambai Antoinette, the president of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, and members of the Burning Spear newspaper team presenting on the African People's Socialist Party's historical struggles to end the colonial imprisonment of African people and to free African political prisoners, and about the Burning Spear newspaper's Mafundi Lake prisoner subscription program. Don't miss that event. Saturday, August 28th, that's this Saturday, 7 p.m. Eastern. Register at tinyurl.com/BlackAugust2K21. Somebody will put that in the chat for you. Register now for the 2021 International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement's International Convention, taking place September 3rd through the 5th, featuring powerful presentations, captivating cultural performances, and a host of exciting workshops to deepen our understanding about this oppressive system and the need for the African Revolution to overturn it. Register today at tinyurl.com/INPDUM Convention 2021. Save the date for the next APSC webinar, Wednesday, September 29th at 7 p.m. Eastern, celebrating, honoring our 45th anniversary, 45 years since the party and the chairman founded the African People's Solidarity Committee. Stay tuned to theburningspear.com/events for more details on that. And tune in for the Reparations in Action radio show series, White Lies Shattered, an eye-opening series that looks at history from the perspective of African and other colonized people and smashes to bits all the myths perpetuated by white power, featuring Penny Hess, our chairwoman, on that podcast. And that is Fridays at 3 p.m. Eastern on Black Power 96 Radio and on demand at uhurusolidarity.podbean.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you might get your podcasts. Every Sunday, last but not least, every Sunday at 8 a.m. Eastern Time, tune in to the Omali Taught Me, hashtag Omali Taught Me Sunday Study, live from Chairman Omali Yeshitela's Facebook page and the Burning Spear TV YouTube channel. For details about these and more upcoming events, go to theburningspear.com/events and make sure to visit uhurusolidarity.org and apsc-uhuru.org to learn more about the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, the African People's Solidarity Committee, and how you can become a member and get organized under the leadership of the African working class to build white solidarity with Black power and unity through reparations. Thank you so much, APSP Chairman Omali Yeshitela, Jihad Abdulmumit, Jaan Laaman, and APSC Chairwoman Penny Hess, and to all of you who participated. This concludes today's event. Free all African political prisoners. Reparations now. Uhuru.